My name is Marty, these are my musings, and let's get rolling. I love looking at empirical sales data, whether it be for movies or comic books or albums. It doesn't matter. I like seeing what the top sellers are each week, each quarter, each year, which is why I am always excited when the website ICV2 releases their sales numbers for board games for the previous quarter. So let's take a look at the top selling games in 4 different categories, starting out number 1 with probably the most popular, board games. The top 4 spots are Catan, Pandemic, Ticket to Ride, and Betrayal at House on the Hill. So I want to stop right there and look at those 4 games first. I think it is really interesting that each of those 4 games are very old games, not the new stuff. And you know, in today's hobby, it seems like we get caught up in the cult of the new. What's new? What's hot? Awesome. Let's move on to the next thing when that's done. But those 4 games have been around for quite a while, which goes to show that either one, people in this hobby are still buying those games, or hopefully, people are coming into the hobby, and those are those gateway games that everybody recommends for people to check out. But as exciting as it is to have those old games on the list, I also want to see some newer games try to achieve that evergreen status, which is why the next few games are very interesting too. At number 5 is Azul, and at number 6 is Sagrada. Both of those games are only a couple years old, and for them to be still selling this well indicates that maybe there's some evergreenness. I just made that term up. Evergreenness to those games. And those are newer games that people may suggest people try out who are just now getting into the hobby. So looking at those top 6 items, that's not the cult of the new stuff. That stuff that's been out for years, even decades, still selling well. Next is Arkham Horror. This would be the Arkham Horror 3rd edition. And this is a game that originally came out in the 80s, and just last year its 3rd edition came out, and it came out 4th quarter. A very, very popular game, so I can understand why this would show up in the top 10 list for the quarter. And it doesn't matter how often they refresh that game, it's always a fantastic seller. Thing is though, I bet it drops out of the top 10 in the next quarter, but we'll just have to wait and see. Next on the list is Gloomhaven. This one is really interesting too, because it's starting to achieve the evergreenness status, but that game is over $100. Now with other games that are evergreens, you typically see them $50, $60 or less. So to have this game that is $100 still continue to sell well quarter after quarter, year after year is just a testament to how popular that game is. Finishing out the list is Mysterium and Scythe. Again, both of them are newer games. Scythe a little bit newer than Mysterium. I'm kind of surprised to see Mysterium there. I thought the popularity had waned on that one, but it just goes to show what I know. Now the next list is a little bit of an odd one to me. It's dice and card games. And well, let's just look at it and I'll show you why some of the items in there are kind of odd. Top 3 are Codenames, Exploding Kittens, and Dominion. Codenames, not surprised at that. Very popular party game, easy to teach, inexpensive game. Exploding Chickens. Exploding Chickens. Now that would be funny. Exploding Kittens at number 2. That is now a mass market game. You'll see it in Target and at Walmart, etc. Number 3, Dominion. Now, when I first saw Dominion on this list, I thought, wait a minute, that should be a board game. But I guess when you really think about it, it's nothing but cards. 100% card game, so I guess they decided to stick it into this category. But there's some others on this list that are kind of odd for this category. Let's continue. Splendor, Super Fight, and The Mind round out 4, 5, and 6. Splendor? There's no dice in it. I mean, there are cards in it, but you got the poker chips. Maybe they're looking at maybe lighter type games. The other 2 make a lot of sense. The Mind is extremely popular, and it's probably going to be one of those games that might become evergreens too, just how popular it is. And again, it's also in mass market stores now too. Next is Star Realms. Star Realms. This game has been out for 4 or 5 years now. It's a solid deck building game. In fact, it's one of those games that if I was to teach deck building, I might start with this one, then maybe over Dominion. Kind of surprised to still see it in the top 10, but glad that it is. The next one on the list is Arkham Horror LCG. Okay, I'm just going to stop right here because I'm going to fanboy for a bit. Squee! I love Arkham Horror LCG. I have been into LCG games since they first came out, like with Warhammer Invasion, but when FFG released the Lord of the Rings LCG, which is a co-op game, I was all in. I enjoyed the mechanics. I liked the co-op. I liked the deck building. I played it for many, many years. Then when Arkham Horror LCG came out, I started playing it more so than Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was a solid mechanical game, but thematically, I don't know, it didn't have much of a narrative for me. As much as I tried to get into the narrative, I just couldn't. But with Arkham Horror LCG, every time I play that game, I am totally sucked into the story. There's a solid game behind it. A lot of choices had to be made. I still get to build decks and everything. Sweet, sweet game. If you have not tried it, I highly recommend checking it out. Now, go! Rounding out the top 10 is Boss Monsters and Seven Wonders. Alright, let's just stop right here. Seven Wonders is considered a card game. Come on, it's got player boards, it's got a lot of different tokens. I think, personally, that should belong in the board game category and not the cards and dice. Hey, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me ask you something, and you can answer it in the comments. If I was to come up to you and say, alright, here's Seven Wonders, which category should it go in? The board game category or the cards and dice? Let me know in the comments. The next list, the top non-collectible miniatures games. We're going to look at the top 5 here. I don't think it's going to be any surprise that number 1 is Warhammer 40K, followed by Age of Sigmar. Games Workshop is killing it right now, so it's no surprise that 2 of their top games, 40K and Age of Sigmar, is sitting at number 1 and number 2. That company has really turned it around over the past several years. And in fact, I made a video last year showing how their business had grown year over year and why. And you can check out the video right there. In fact, it wasn't that long ago where Games Workshop was in stiff competition with Privateer Press with their games War Machine and Hordes. But since the 8th edition 40K came out and they turned the company around, started coming up with a lot of new products, they're just blowing everybody away. At number 3, Dungeons & Dragons Nolzur's Marvelous Minis. This is an odd one too because it's not a game. Okay, yeah, you can use the miniatures playing an RPG and that's the whole purpose of it, but in itself it's not a miniatures game. I guess they had to stick it somewhere it was here because you can see what you're buying. It's not collectible, but I guess it's the best place to put it. Rounding out the list is Star Wars X-Wing and Star Wars Legion. Fantasy Flight has that Star Wars IP license and they are taking advantage of it. X-Wing has been very popular for a few years. They came out with a new edition last year. Legion just came out earlier last year, which was basically a miniatures game that's based on the ground and not in space, so they got all their bases covered. But if you notice, there are 2 games not listed on here that I referred to earlier, War Machine and Hordes from Privateer Press. Like I said, it wasn't long ago that both of those, the War Machine and Hordes, showed up on the top 5 every quarter, and now they're no longer found anywhere on the list. It's a shame, because I loved playing War Machine. In fact, War Machine was the game that got me into miniatures, but you gotta keep up with the Joneses or Games Workshop. Now let's look at the top-selling RPGs. First up, Dungeons & Dragons, then Legend of the Five Rings, Star Wars RPG, Starfinder, and Vampire. Dungeons & Dragons, since the release of the 5th edition, has just skyrocketed in popularity. It has taken over everything. There are shows built all around playing D&D games. Critical Role, which is a very popular YouTube show where people sit around and play D&D and you get invested into their characters. In fact, right now there is a Kickstarter going on where they're funding an animated series based on the characters from Critical Role, and right now it is almost at $5.5 million. RPGs have just really taken off, and D&D is at the forefront. In fact, I would love to see what the distance is in sales between D&D and the number 2 item, because I bet you there's a large difference. This list is also interesting too because it wasn't too many years ago, before 5th edition came out, that Pathfinder was always number 1 on the list and D&D was after it. Then, much like when Games Workshop came out with their new 40K and kind of took over, D&D came out with 5th edition, took over, and now Pathfinder's not even on this list. But I think the reason might be is because Pathfinder's getting ready to release a 2nd edition. It's in beta right now. In fact, it was just announced it's going to come out later this year, August 1st. So many people who are interested in Pathfinder may decide, no need for me to go buy any source books or anything like that if you're coming out with a new version. I'll just wait and get that one. So maybe when the 2nd edition comes out, it'll pop back into the top 5. Hey, I said I was only going to do a few of these, but you know what? I'm going to throw a bonus one in there. Let's look at collectible card games. And Can anybody guess what's going to be number 1? Magic the Gathering. Imagine that. Followed by Pokemon TCG. By the way, if you want to get your kids into playing a trading card game, I highly recommend Pokemon. It has very much of a Magic feel, but it has a more friendly theme. You've got new Pokemon games coming out, so they might be able to relate to it. It's how I taught my kids the concept of CCGs, and now they are really into Magic. Likewise, they have to have a good paying job to keep up with that cardboard drug. Rounding out the top 5 is Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, Keyforge, and Dragon Ball Super. It's really cool to see Keyforge up in there. While it's not a CCG in the sense of you buy blind booster packs, you don't know what's going to be in there. Instead, you're buying a blind deck and not sure what's going to be in there. I guess it still has a collectible aspect to it, but since that game just came out also 4th quarter of last year, it was hot, it was hard to find. They're going to be coming out with a new edition later. Let's see if it manages to stay in the top 5. So that's a wrap on looking at the top selling games in different tabletop categories. But I have a question for you. Were you surprised by any on this list? Or did you think there would be some on this list that weren't on there? Let me know in the comments and we'll chat it up. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and go over there and smash that like button and flick that subscribe button. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, I have been Marty Connell. These have been my musings, and I am out.